The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
What seemed inconceivable a week ago is happening. It's not the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, it's Chapel Bill. Bill Belichick, believe it or not, is going to be the head coach of the University of North Carolina football program. And as his 24-year-old girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, put on social media, we're on to Chapel Hill. Wow. Stunner. Reaction to that. Seth Wickersham has a piece at ESPN today with some more insight on that and why he's not going back to the NFL. And shockingly, he's going to college. We'll get to that. It's getting to be crunch time for the RFK bill. Commissioner Roger Goodell commented on that yesterday. We'll deal with that. And there's an injury for the Commanders, which looks like it's going to be season ending for Noah Brown. We'll get to that and a whole lot more. But this news about Bill Belichick is, when you step back from it, it's really unbelievable. He's 72 years old. He has been clear about wanting to get back into coaching, and most assumed that would be the NFL. A new hiring cycle coming up every year. There's like 7 to 10 jobs open. That'll be the case this year with 3 of them already open. And you know, what was the reason behind this? Was it that he sensed the NFL didn't want him? Or was it possible he didn't want the NFL? And the way the NFL operates is different than the way it operates in college. And at the University of North Carolina, he'll be able to do a lot of what he was able to do with the Patriots. Nobody's going to give him complete control anymore. They saw what happened when Tom Brady left New England, and he turned out to be a pretty lousy general manager. Let's face it. And when things were rolling there for 20 years and you had Brady, it was impressive the way he would, surround him with guys who, weren't necessarily elite talent, especially at the skilled positions. A lot of reclamation projects at running back and secondary wide receivers and so forth, with the exception of Randy Moss. And although they had an undefeated season that year, they did not win the Super Bowl. And now at the University of North Carolina, he will be the poobah. He'll have complete control over everything. He is going to make, according to reports, twice as much as Mac Brown has been making, $5 million a year. They got rid of 73-year-old Mac Brown for 72-year-old Bill Belichick, so he'll get $10 million a year, but that's about half of what he was making when he was with the New England Patriots. And this Seth Wickersham story, which came out today at ESPN, and he does some great investigative reporting for ESPN along with Don Van Natta. They did a piece on Dan Snyder, which I think really helped pave the way to get Snyder the hell out of here. We can thank both of them for getting that done with a great investigative report on just how messed up things were before Snyder exited. But in his reporting today, he has a quote from an unnamed Bill Belichick confidant, I should say, who says, quote, "This is a big FU to the NFL." And it does appear that as he looked around at the landscape and looked at the jobs that may be open, there were flaws in all of them, and all of them involved him answering to somebody else. A lot of teams wanted him to coach, apparently, but not all of them wanted him to run the whole show, and the ones that possibly did, he really wasn't interested in them. He has put out a statement. This was from Belichick last night. "I am excited for the opportunity at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I grew up around college football with my dad and treasured those times. I have always wanted to coach in college, and now I look forward to building the football program in Chapel Hill." Just a couple of quick thoughts on this, and I'll have more to say about it in the 10 o'clock hour. There's 2 things at play here. One is he's a lifer. He's a coaching lifer. And in many ways, this resembles Larry Brown. Larry Brown is the only coach to win a national championship in college basketball, as he did with Kansas, and he won an NBA championship as coach of the Pistons. But into his 80s, he's still coaching. He's coaching SMU. I don't know if there are any other stops, but he made stops as assistants in other places, and he just can't keep himself away from the bench. I get He's probably mid-80s now, and I would guess that if somebody offered him an opportunity, he would be interested in it. Not that anybody would at this point, but, yeah, these guys, this is what they do. It's, it's like you watch Springsteen in his 70s, Billy Joel in his 70s. What are they still doing up there? Well, that's what they do. They love this. You can't be this good at what they do if they don't love it, and he loves it. So that's part of the reason he's still coaching and not passing up cushy money to work on TV. The other thing I thought of, and this may seem like a very odd comparison, but if you follow the history of Bill Walsh, the late, great Bill Walsh, who created incredible success with the San Francisco 49ers, Walsh was an assistant coach, the offensive coordinator with the Cincinnati Bengals when Paul Brown not only owned the team but coached the team. And Paul Brown, who had built great teams in Cleveland, one of the great coaches of all time, he got fired there and kind of got his revenge at the Browns by buying another team in Ohio, the Cincinnati Bengals of the AFL, and coaching them. And Walsh was the guy who came up with the West Coast offense. They had a quarterback by the name of Greg Cook, who was a tremendous rookie. And had we had modern surgery, he probably would have been a Hall of Fame quarterback. Walsh said of all the ones he coached, including Joe Montana, Cook had the potential to be the best. But about halfway through his rookie season, he suffered what turned out to be a torn rotator cuff. And in those days, they didn't have the arthroscopic surgery to fix it, and he never really made it back to the NFL. He tried for a couple years, but just couldn't throw, and that was the end of his career. So when he went out, they went to Virgil Carter, the backup, who didn't have an NFL arm. But Walsh came up with this quick throw offense, the now called West Coast offense, even though it was invented in the Midwest, and that's what he took to San Francisco with him. But when Paul Brown retired as coach of the Bengals and moved up to just being the owner, it was assumed that Walsh would become the head coach. He was passed over for another assistant named Tiger Johnson. And Walsh said to himself, if I want to be a head coach, I got to be a head coach. And he knew that the path to do that was in college. So he took the Stanford job. He never coached John Elway, but did recruit him and had some very good teams at Stanford, which led him to the San Francisco 49ers, and the rest is history. I think Bill Belichick is still interested in Don Shula's record, still chasing it. He needs 15 more wins to get that. But it could be, even at 72, he's saying to himself, I got to do what Bill Walsh did, and I got to prove myself again at the college level. Look how quickly it can happen for you. At a similar place, a basketball school, Indiana, Kirk Cignetti turned around a program that a lot of people didn't even know existed, and they're in the playoff this year. So it could happen that quickly for Belichick at another basketball school. And if he does that, a year from now, even though it's a 5-year contract with North Carolina, so what? He could be back in the NFL in a year, and at 73, may begin the chase again for the Shula record. So there's a lot of things up in the air right now, but we do know this. Bill Belichick is going to be, for the first time in his life, at the age of 72, a college coach. He's never even been an assistant at the college level, all pro football. Now he goes to college, which resembles pro football, maybe more than pro football resembles pro football now. Who knows? Dan Quinn, talking yesterday to the media, revealed this, and I don't think this was on most people's radar after what happened in the Tennessee game where Noah Brown went out with what they call the rib injury, and most assume that, after the bye week he'd be ready to go. Not the case.
Tough news on Noah. He's going to be out for a while, and so Brown. So he had a significant internal injury from the game. And so that's going to knock him out for a while. And we love him, and this play style, the identity of how he goes. And so that one hurts. He's been absolutely one of our glue guys. And after the game, or during the game, between him and the medical staff, they did a really good job to address what was a serious injury. And, fortunately, he's going to be okay, but it's going to knock him out for a bit.
Say for a bit, is this season ending for him?
Yeah, we'll visit that later this week, but it's likely, heading that way.
Okay, so that eliminates the receiver who's made the biggest catch of the season. He caught the Hail Mary pass to beat the Bears. He's also got 35 catches, which is third on the team, and he's got size. He's 6'2", and they don't have anybody else that big, and that's going to be missed. Now, they did pick up another receiver yesterday, KJ Osborne, who had been released by the New England Patriots. He had some pretty good years. Minnesota averaged 53 catches a year for 3 seasons. So he could be an addition, but that's a blow. That's going to hurt them. But, this is what you deal with this time of year. And injuries start to add up. And looks like they're going to do without Noah Brown for the rest of the season, even into the playoffs. If they put him on injured reserve, technically he would be available to play in the playoffs. But the way Quinn is talking there, it sounds like it's season ending, and he's out for the year. Now, there is one big addition that's coming up this week, and it's been long awaited. Marshawn Lattimore, they got just before the trade deadline, which was early last month. So they've played, I think, now 4 games without him after picking him up for a pretty decent haul of draft picks. And Quinn yesterday addressed what it'll mean to have Lattimore on the field for them finally.
To add a player of this caliber, like after the trade deadline, so to speak, and that just doesn't happen very often. And every once in a while there might be a player that comes back off an IR that had an injury that was there, and there is an energy that goes along with that. And so we're really pumped to have him and get rolling with him. But it does take a few games to get into that rhythm, with new people, but it can change the math. There's no doubt about that. And you're on the right topic, but it's important getting into the reps and going through that, over the next month, because then collectively, how do I communicate with him? There's an eye signal. I mean, a nonverbal call, those kind of things that you don't necessarily see at practice that happen in the game. And so that experience is really valuable too.
Okay. So it sounds like, he's saying don't expect him to be like Deion Sanders as soon as he steps on the field on Sunday, even though he's going back to a familiar place, playing in New Orleans where he just came from. But he said, it takes time to work him into the defense and so forth. I imagine he'll start, but again, there is some chemistry issues that go along with this, even though he's a veteran. Quarterback for the Saints, being coy on this, not that I think it matters a whole lot. Derek Carr almost certainly will be out with reports that he suffered a serious fracture of his non-throwing hand. He's also been in concussion protocol, which means either Jake Haener, who played in place of him in their last game, which was a win, by the way. He would have came in the Giants game. And then there's also Spencer Rattler, who started 3 games for him this year. But they're both inexperienced, one second year. Haener, the other, is a rookie. And what Quinn said was, in preparing, it doesn't make that much of a difference because their offense is what their offense is. And we just look at trends and the kind of things that they do with all 3 of their quarterbacks. And Bobby Wagner, who's been there, done that, this is his view of the Saints, and his impression is really we haven't had to worry about the quarterback here. It's the running back.
Just trying to understand, like, the play style. Everybody's play style is a little bit different, but at the end of the day, like, the concepts are the same, what they want to do. And no matter who the quarterback is, they're going to get 41 the ball. So, I would be surprised. No matter who's back there under the center, that 41 doesn't get the ball.
Yeah, 41 is a hell of a good running back, and that's really what the focus is going to be. Alvin Kamara and Dan Quinn said yesterday, this is a fantastic player. The speed off the ball, putting your foot in the ground, that's Alvin, and that's his speed. He can really stick his foot in the ground and jab, and then on the other side of him is a receiver. It's not just screens, but you can put a running back out there in the slot and outside and throw the ball down the field. It changes things. Yeah, he's a terrific player, but Washington has done a better job against the run. It's one thing when you face Saquon Barkley of Philadelphia. It's another thing, I think, when you face Alvin Kamara, though he is an excellent player, and that's going to be a concern. Jaden Daniels, quarterback, always speaks on Wednesday. Jaden Daniels' day yesterday, off the bye week, ready to roll again after he basically completed a college season, had a little break, and now is going to play some more football.
I know what's ahead of us, and, we got to go out there and compete and try to win some football games. But, it's always good to step back for a minute and kind of just reset and, take the football hat off and, just we could be able to go out there and be a regular person. Not get caught up in, I got to watch film or do this or I got to go lift and stuff like that. It's good to kind of just reset, be around the people that kept me grounded and keep me humble. And, it's good. But once I knew I got back out here, I knew it was time to go.
And he's going back to a place where he won the Heisman Trophy. Not exactly. He won Baton Rouge with Louisiana, but New Orleans not that far away, and was somewhat pumped, sounded like, to be going back to the Big Easy.
It's going to be fun. I play football down the road, so I went to a couple of their games. I was blessed to go to a couple of their games, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good challenge. They're a good team. Superdome gets pretty loud, and they're rolling. So we'll go out there. We'll see what we can do and compete against them.
By the way, New Orleans is losing a college quarterback, Darian Mensah, who came out of really like nowhere for Tulane. He was not expected to be in the mix for the starting quarterback. They went 9-3. They'll face Ole Miss in the Gator Bowl. He's obviously opting out as he goes in the transfer portal to Duke. And Duke, which is one of the finest academic institutions in the country. My daughter-in-law is a proud graduate of it. I guess it's fitting that Duke will have a quarterback named Mensah. Last thing from Daniels. Playoff talk. They've done everything they can to avoid it this season. Dan Quinn is, saying, hey, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the next game and then the next game, and then we deal with that as they come along. This is Daniels about as forward-looking towards the playoffs as I've heard him all season.
You can't really hide from any of that. I mean, you turn on your phone, you see stuff like that, so it's not really like an unknown, but it's like focus on the little things. Obviously, everybody go around this time who's able to be a part of it wants to be in the playoffs. But we can't focus on 4 weeks from now. The playoffs is here. We got to go out there. We got to go out there and compete against the Saints, worry about the Saints, then move on to the next week, and like I said, let the chips fall. Yeah, let the chips fall where they may, I think is the full phrase on that. But, they've got New Orleans. I think 3 of the 4 games are definitely winnable. They got Saints on the road this week, come home against Philadelphia. We still don't have a time and a date. It's either going to be a Saturday or Sunday game against the Falcons in the last weekend of December, and then they close out the season against the Dallas Cowboys. So, they're in good shape. And if they win 3 of the 4, they'll certainly be in the playoffs. If they win 2 of the 4, pretty good chance they'll be in the playoffs with 10 wins. And then there's even the possibility that they overtake Green Bay for, I guess would be the 6th spot in the NFC. So we will see. Coming up, Sam Darnold. Has he changed the outlook for the NFL draft? A 27-year-old quarterback who's clearly hit his stride and will be on the open market next season. Does it have teams rethinking what they will do at the top of the draft? Mel Kiper on that as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Coming up in the 10 o'clock hour, we'll spend some time on what looks like a very tense issue right now with the RFK bill up against the clock. The Senate has to vote on this a week from tomorrow before they go out on recess, or it goes into the holding bin until next year. And with another year on this, what does this mean for the future of the stadium? Could there be a deal made with Maryland to keep the team where they are? I don't think Virginia's in play, but the clock is ticking on this. And Muriel Bowser, D.C. mayor, had some things to say yesterday, saying essentially that Maryland is holding them hostage. And it's one of those things that if you want the stadium to be built in D.C., we may be at a point in time where it's do or die right now. And do or die may mean just over a week from tomorrow. So we'll talk about that. Also, what Roger Goodell said about the issue yesterday at the owners' meetings as he held his news conference. Troy Aikman on last night on the PTI show. And, it's interesting what has happened this year with Sam Darnold, who went from scrap heap bust, number 2 pick of the draft, went through the Jets, didn't work out there, sat on the bench in San Francisco, winds up in Minnesota, and the feeling is he's going to be the rabbit. You usually have a veteran backup comes in, just like Marcus Mariota comes in here for Jaden Daniels, and he's going to play until they're sure that their top draft pick, J.J. McCarthy, who led Michigan to the national championship, will be ready to go. And I remember seeing Kevin O'Connell, coach of the Vikings, on the Rich Eisen show during the preseason. And he said, no, we're not going to have a quarterback competition here. Sam Darnold is our starting quarterback. That's it. We drafted J.J. McCarthy, but we're going into the season with Darnold as the starter. And, who didn't kind of snicker at that like, yeah, sure, maybe he's just trying to snow the rest of the league. This guy is not a starting quarterback. Well, he's been great. He had 5 touchdown passes in his last game. Minnesota's 11-2 on the season. And all of a sudden, a guy who was drafted to be a franchise quarterback, number 2 overall by the Jets, is a franchise quarterback who's going to hit the open market as a free agent. How did this happen? Troy Aikman on last night with Mike and Tony on PTI, and how this has blossomed this year for a guy who was on the scrap heap but found the right coach.
Kevin O'Connell is what's different. And I just think that I've said it for a long time. There's a lot of quarterbacks that come into the league. I would have been one of them if Norv Turner hadn't have come in my 3rd year and really changed the trajectory of not only my career, but the entire organization. Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith would give Norv credit for what they were able to do in their careers because of what he did in coordinating the offense. And so you take someone and you put them in an offense with Kevin O'Connell or with Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay. There's a handful of these guys offensively that really know how to put players in a position to have success. And if you're one of these quarterbacks that's fortunate enough to get with one of these play callers, then you have a real opportunity to be successful. I think if you look at a guy like Brock Purdy, for instance, he's phenomenal. And he's not a product of the system, but the system matters. And so you put him or you put me or you put some of these other quarterbacks, even quarterbacks that are having success elsewhere besides Sam Darnold, in other offenses, and probably the results are the same. So I'm just really happy that Sam got an opportunity to get with someone like Kevin O'Connell and have the year that he's having, because I know up to this point, it's been a real frustrating time for him. And it's hard to win football games as it is. And it's hard to be good as a quarterback in this league. But he's having a phenomenal year, and I couldn't be happier for him.
Yeah, obviously, Norv was tremendous as an offensive coordinator, just, was not a good head coach, although he did get 3 shots and eventually took the Chargers to the AFC Championship game. But as you hear from Troy Aikman, his true talent was developing quarterbacks, and he gives him credit for saving his career. So there's that. Now, here's the question. With Darnold hitting the open market at a young age, what do you do if you're going to be at the top of the draft like the Giants, who will clearly need a quarterback? The Daniel Jones experiment is now gone. Would you go after him? Cleveland, yeah, they're still on the hook for Deshaun Watson for a lot of money for another year, but maybe they're looking too. Tennessee may need a quarterback. I mean, there's teams, the Jets, as crazy as it sounds, I don't think he would go back to the Jets, but they're going to be in play here. And, with this 27-year-old guy who's proven that he's made the hurdle to become an outstanding quarterback, someone that you would invest quite a bit of money in, would you try and go after him rather than use a high draft pick, 2, 3, 4, top of the draft, to go after a quarterback in what is not considered to be a tremendous quarterback draft? It's Shedeur Sanders may be the best quarterback in the draft, and there's questions about him. So yesterday, Mel was on our morning show on Sportsmanlike and addressed the Darnold issue.
Well, Sam's 27 years of age, and you have J.J. McCarthy. What decision do they make there if Sam leads them deep into the playoffs? I mean, this still has to play out. We have to see how far Sam takes them. He's had a heck of a year, and he's 27, okay? He's 27 years of age right now. He's a young quarterback. Justin Fields is at Pittsburgh. He's 25. So, I mean, we look at options other than the draft. There's a few out there. Kirk Cousins is going to be 37 in August. So, again, if they go with Michael Penix Jr., do you want that 1 year? Is there an organization going to go 1 year with Kirk? There will be somebody, because these quarterbacks don't grow on trees. It's not. You just can't say, we're going to cut ties with our quarterback because we want to go from a single or a double or whatever to a home run grand slam. Who's going to provide you with that home run grand slam? In this draft, is it Shedeur Sanders? Is it Cam Ward? After that, good luck. And we don't even know if those two are going to be great. And certainly we know others are pretty good. Everybody thought Sam Darnold stunk. He's terrible. Get him out of here. Now he's resurfaced with the Minnesota Vikings, like Tannehill did and others have done, right? We've seen that with 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the NFL right now. So if we're not going to let players like quarterbacks develop, we're going to kick them to the curb before they have a chance to, just because they have some struggles early on, then you're not going to be happy with anybody. So I don't know. I think it's this year, as I said, this draft is underwhelming. These two quarterbacks, particularly Shedeur, if you say he's number one, would have been 4th or 5th last year based on grade with those quarterbacks. This isn't a Burrow to a Herbert year. It's certainly not like last year. So you would just have to hope that in the draft you can't pass. You can't say, well, I'm going to wait till next year or the year after and take Arch Manning. You can't do that. So you got to deal with what you have in terms of the draft this year. And as I say, this year, good luck, because some of these guys are going to go, but in other drafts, they wouldn't even gone in the top 10.
Well, Mel, with all that being said, knowing that Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, who are sitting there at the top of the draft, feel underwhelming compared to, say, last year's quarterback market, is there a thought process that maybe a player like Travis Hunter, who is so electric, who's obviously diverse in the way that they can use him on the field, that he could in any world go number one overall?
Ahead of the quarterback? I don't think so. I just think it's so much about the focus. You've got to get that quarterback, and you kind of talk yourself into these guys. I have Shedeur right now 4 on the board. I have Cam Ward at 8. That's not number 1, but if you need a quarterback, you got to take him. And, to me, that's where the debate is on Travis. Where does he play? Where is he going to be best suited to be a elite player in the NFL? Some think it's receiver, some think it's corner. So there's that, and he can't play both in the NFL for a long time. You can't play both even as a rookie. You're going to be sprinkled in at that other spot, but not full time. So, again, I think you got to force it. You got to hope that Shedeur is, and I say there's elements of Goff, you see elements of Burrow, a little bit of Brady when he was at Michigan before he became a superstar and the best of all time. So you see elements, but again, how do they feel? Last year the Giants didn't feel good enough to take J.J. McCarthy. They took Malik Neighbors. They wanted Drake May. Didn't work that out. Then they had a chance for J.J., didn't take him. He's at Minnesota now. That means Darnold could be moving on. What happens with J.J.? He's still young. He's only 21, 22 years of age. J.J. McCarthy is. So right now, he's the youngest. He would be the youngest quarterback. And then he's 21, turns 22 in January 20th. So he's the youngest quarterback of all the guys in the mix to be a potential starter in the NFL. J.J. McCarthy would be that guy. What do they do? Knowing how Sam Darnold is playing, if he runs through and goes great all the way into the playoffs and deep into the playoffs, what the heck do they do? You can't get rid of Sam Darnold. So if he takes you all the way or takes you close to it and plays really good football, we've seen quarterbacks benefit. Joe Flacco led that Ravens through that gauntlet, won those road games, got to the Super Bowl, won it. You got to pay him. Mark Rippon did it back in the day at Washington with the Redskins. He took them to the Super Bowl and he got paid. Okay, Jones won a playoff game, got paid. These quarterbacks, as I said, fans want to scream, got to get a quarterback. They don't grow on trees. They're not just there for the heck. And in when multiple teams need quarterbacks, then if you're not in the right spot, good luck even getting the guys that we're not that excited about.
Mel, I totally hear where you're coming from in terms of Shedeur going 1 or 2, Cam Ward, same thing. Field Yates said similar things. What I'm fascinated by is historically, do you remember, and I know this is very much putting you on the spot, but you're Mel Kiper, you remember everything. Do you remember the lowest player ranked on your big board that went number 1 overall?
Lowest player, I have to check that out because I go back to 1978-79 on that. The lowest rated player going into that draft, not who turned out to be the
right. Because if you think about what you just said, you had him 4 and he's going to go 1 theoretically. I mean, Fields came on and said that he had Shedeur, I think, at 14 overall on his big board.
Yeah, he got him a lot lower than I do. Yes.
But he would still have him going number 1 overall. Is that rare to have that kind of difference between the big board and the actual draft?
Yeah, I remember when you got forced up. I can give you the offensive tackle at Central Michigan who ended up going number 1 to the Kansas City Chiefs by the name of Eric Fisher. Yeah, he would have been – I was a year similar where you didn't have that great. Now, you think about it, you have years where even when Bill Parcells was with Miami Dolphins and he needed a quarterback, right? And Matt Ryan was sitting there. And he took Jake Long, and he waited until the second round to take Chad Henne because he believed in all those starts that Chad Henne had at Michigan. I guess he thought maybe he could be a Brady type. We get him in the second round. We get the left tackle, number 1, and Jake Long from Michigan. We reunite him with his teammate at Michigan and Chad Henne, and we're going to be great. Chad Henne didn't turn out to be a really good quarterback as a starter, good backup, not a starter. And look what happened with Matt Ryan. So he kind of got a little cute there, and look what happened. It didn't pay off even for Bill Parcells, right? So in Fisher, they had to take somebody. Remember, the other guy was Luke Jokel. How'd that work out? Okay? So there's years where I say you can't pass. Andre Bruce went number 1 in the draft. There's been all these different years where if you have the number 1 pick, and you need a guy, and nobody's willing to trade up, you can't pass. You can't say, I'm going to wait till next year. I'll wait to take this pick next year. You can't do that. So a lot of it's good luck. When Peyton Manning went number 1 to the Colts, they were fortunate. The Colts had that pick and were able to take him, right? You got to be fortunate sometimes when you get that number 1 pick. Is there that elite quarterback there to take? Because at the end of the day, you got to make a pick. And like I said, Eric Fisher is a perfect, to answer your question, it would probably be, I'd have to check back to 78, 79, but I think Eric Fisher from Central Michigan, an offensive tackle at a Mid-American Conference, would be that guy that was forced up there because, as I say, you got to deal with the players that are in that draft. And somebody's got to go number 1 if nobody wants them to trade up. You got to make the pick. And I remember the year they were passing. Kevin Williams ended up going to Minnesota after they passed a couple times. I think he became a heck of a player. Terrell Suggs, Jordan Gross, they were getting that racing that card up to take in the top 10, turned out to be really good. Great players as well. Suggs is a Hall of Famer. So that year it worked out even when you're passing. Everybody's taking shots at the Vikings saying, oh, they don't know what the heck they're doing. They end up with Kevin Williams. So, again, there's no perfect formula, guys, but certainly in this draft this year, if you say the number 1 player is Travis Hunter is going to have a high grade. So this is not a draft where the number 1 player has a low grade. That's not the case. We're talking specifically about the quarterbacks, right? Yes. But if you talk about Travis Hunter in any draft, guys, he would be right up there and have that elite grade.
That's Mel Kiper doing what Mel Kiper does better than anybody. The thing I would ask him about as a follow-up, and Evan Cohen may not have known this. He's a lot younger than I am. But in 1989, when Jeff George was coming out of Illinois, he had a tantalizing arm. I mean, we did our shows out at then Redskins Park in 2000, the year they went for it. You know, the Fortune 500 Redskins cost a fortune, finished 500. And when you would see Jeff George warm up, it was incredible. He threw the most beautiful spiral, and he could throw it. We had him on the air. He said he could throw it, he thought, 85 yards in the air, and I don't doubt it. He had a great arm. But he was a problem, as we saw. He got himself flushed out of the NFL because of his attitude, not because of his talent. And as I recall, now Mel didn't do what they called a big board then. He was working with ESPN, but the amount of time he had on the air and so forth was limited. But he did have him as his 89th prospect because of the attitude. Now, I think he knew that he was going at the top of the draft, and most other draft people said, oh, yeah, he's gone number one. And the Indianapolis Colts, he was from that area, they had traded up. They'd given up draft picks to get up to number 1, to take him at 89. And you saw what happened with his career. People kept taking chances on him because of his arm, but he almost always let you down. And even when he had success at Minnesota, got them to the second round of the playoffs, Denny Green didn't want him back. And Dan Snyder had to have him. So he brought him in here, and Brad Johnson had a great year the year before. He brought him in, paid him more money, and that was all part of the whole mess that happened in 2000. So when you're talking about guys who are predicted down the board and then go higher, that would probably be the ultimate, going from the 89th best prospect on Mel's board to number 1 overall. But I think he kind of knew that was happening. He was just saying to the rest of the league, hey, this is what I'm hearing from scouts. This is what I'm hearing from people who are insiders. This is a tough guy to deal with, and you may not necessarily want to invest in him, even though he's got one of the great arms that anybody's seen. So I am looking forward to watching tomorrow night on ESPN the 30 for 30 on the New York Sack Exchange. That was the defensive line of the New York Jets of the 1980s, which was so famous, partly because they played New York and partly because they were really good at getting sacks. That team didn't get to the Super Bowl. They came close, making it to the AFC Championship game in 1982, where they played on the road in Miami. And Dolphins may have been playing around a little bit because they didn't put a tarp over the field at the Orange Bowl, and it was a quagmire when they played, and it was a 14-0 game with the Dolphins winning on 2 A.J. Dewey pick sixes off of, who was it? It was not Ken O'Brien yet, but Richard Todd was the quarterback for the Jets. And so the Dolphins went to the Super Bowl. They played the Redskins. That was the one with the Rigo run at the Rose Bowl, and Super Bowl 17, first Super Bowl championship for Washington. So anyway, they were a team that was in the playoffs, in the mix, and got a lot of attention because of the defense. And the best pass rusher on the team, though the worst person was Mark Gastineau. And Gastineau was all about Gastineau and getting sacks. And he had this sack dance, which the NFL disallowed for a while. They've gone back and forth on these celebrations. Now they like him again, so let him do it. But, he was getting penalized for that, so they stopped that. They had a chance to get to the AFC Championship game in 1986 season. And there was a drive that the Cleveland Browns had with Bernie Kosar, which looks like it had been stopped. But Gastineau got called for roughing the passer at a time where you really had to go out of your way to hit the quarterback. It's not like now where you breathe on him and you get roughing the passer. It was a roughing the passer penalty, kept the drive alive, and actually Mark Mosley, who had been cut by the Redskins and was with the Browns, kicked the field goal, send the game into overtime, and then Mosley kicked the game winner. The Browns go to Denver. John Elway beats them with the drive, and then the Broncos go and play the Giants in the Super Bowl. But Gastineau was a guy who was accumulating sacks, and at one time he held the sack record. They didn't start keeping track of sacks until 1982, which was like 3 years into his career. But for a single season, he held the sack record until it was broken by Michael Strahan last game of the 98 season, where it looked like Brett Favre, well, he did. He took a dive. It was at the end of the game, and he wanted to help out his buddy, so he went down. He could have avoided the sack, and he went down. So this is the part of the 30 for 30. If you watch tomorrow night, where Gastineau first is describing how angry he is that his sack record was taken away from him, followed by, and this was the stunning video that everybody seems to be reacting to, was a card show where Gastineau showed up and confronted Brett Favre, who was signing autographs, about what happened that day at the end of the 98 season.
Anybody will tell you Brett Favre took a dive. And you know it, she knows it, he knows it, and everybody knows it. Excuse me. Finally met. Now you tell
we met a long time ago. At least I saw you.
Right.
How you doing?
When you fell down for him. I'm gonna get my sack back. I'm gonna get my sack back, dude.
You probably would hurt me.
Well, I don't care. You hurt me. You hurt me. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
You really hurt me. You hurt me, Brett.
We got to get back to this, Brett. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the handler at the card show. Got to get away from this. Now, I guess to be somewhat fair, though, the fact that he's all obsessed with this is not different than the way he was throughout his playing career. But there is some indication that he may have suffered some head trauma and may be suffering from some dementia on that. But he did participate in the interviews for this show, so I'm interested to see that. Now, yesterday, Boomer Esiason, who does the morning show on WFAN, Boomer and Geo, he played against Gastineau, and this is what he had to say about the plight of his former foe.
I can't stand the guy. The guy was a dirty, cheap shot and son of a bitch, as far as I'm concerned. And, I know this because he was on the elevator in the Westin in Cincinnati telling my buddies who are there to watch the game that you tell your boy Boomer to call an ambulance because he's going down. And he was trying to cheap shot me the whole damn game. So screw him. That's what I say.
Yeah.
And I knew he would be pissed because that's exactly what it looked like for Michael Strahan and Brett Favre. It looked exactly like that. So I understand why he's pissed, but screw him.
Now, the other thing that he brought up, and I hadn't really thought of it this way, and this would be for Brett Favre, though Favre had such standing in Green Bay at this point. He'd already, been to a Super Bowl, and I think he went back again. Or maybe that was the year that they won their first Super Bowl. Might have been after the 98 season. No, I think they already won a Super Bowl, so they were going back, and that's the one where they played Denver. They had won the year before, but this thing here about the sack that Favre took, what Boomer Esiason said is that if he had done the same thing, his offensive lineman at Cincinnati would have been pissed. He played with some great linemen. Great. Anthony Munoz may have been the best left tackle who ever played. Max Montoya. They had a great offensive line, and they took pride in protecting the quarterback. And he said if he were to take a sack like Favre took, they would be really mad at him because, that counts on their stats. They gave up a sack that they shouldn't have given up. So anyway, I think Gastineau gets what he deserves. A terrible guy, crossed the picket line, went to jail for assaulting his wife, all that stuff. I mean, there's nothing redeeming about him. But it is a very interesting story, and it's interesting now how it's taken on new life after all these years. What are we talking about? 25, 26 years since the sack record was broken. And by the way, the record has been tied a couple of times, so it's not like even if you took away that sack that Strahan had, that he would hold the record. It wouldn't work that way. He would be among the record holders, and it still wouldn't get him in the Hall of Fame, which he thinks he deserves, and he does not. He's not getting in the Hall of Fame. We'll follow up on the Juan Soto thing. I guess I should have commented on this the other day, but John Heyman in the New York Post talking about what it came down to. Most people raised their eyebrows like, really? He went to the Mets over the Yankees over $5 million when he got $765 million? 760 wasn't enough to keep him with the Yankees, where he appeared to be happy. Well, apparently he was not happy, according to Heyman, because he wanted a luxury suite for his family. And the Yankees said, well, we'll let you have a luxury suite, but you're going to have to pay for it. We'll give you a discount, but we set a precedent with other Yankees great players, including Derek Jeter, who's no longer with the team, but Aaron Judge is. So we're charging Aaron Judge to have a suite at a discount rate. We'll give you the same deal. And, of course, Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, was willing to give him anything, and he said, the hell with it. I'll give it to you for free. Come on here. I'll give you $5 million more, too. And that's what, if that was the deciding factor, it seems a little far-fetched. But let me tell you this, and I'll get to this in a second. This is one, it's not as much chump change as you might think, because a suite at Yankee Stadium could go for as much as $25,000 a game. And you're talking over the length of the deal, which would be 15 years. You could be another $20 million. But, again, that shouldn't have held things up. But it's interesting the way that some athletes look at these things. And I always think back of this series that Kevin Merida did with the Post when he was following Tracy McGrady when he came up for free agency. Now, Tracy McGrady was one of those guys who came right out of high school, drafted by the Toronto Raptors in the NBA at the age of 19. And by the time he was 21, things were a little different then. You could become a free agent after 3 years. He hit free agency. He was 21 years old. He was still a kid. But in chronicling his search for a new team, Merida talked about the things that excited Tracy McGrady. And when they would go on a road trip, they would get meal money in cash. So he'd get $300 or $400 in cash when he went to the road. Even though he's making millions of dollars, that excited him because he didn't really have an understanding of money. And he said one of the things that helped to convince him to go to the Orlando Magic was they had a smoothie machine in the locker room. He didn't have that in Toronto. The smoothie machine he thought was really cool. That helped to attract him. I remember when Mark Cuban first bought the Dallas Mavericks. He did things like putting flat screen TVs in each locker and having extra fluffy towels. They gravitated to that because, for people who are not sophisticated about money, and it's sometimes it's people who don't come from money, like Tracy McGrady did not. Juan Soto did not come from money, though he's been around long enough to understand it to some degree. They just know it's a number. The thing that they can hold in their hand, what they can touch, like a suite, like fluffy towels, like a smoothie machine, that's meaningful to them. And when we get down the road, if the Yankees look foolish and Juan Soto goes on to become the superstar of the next 10 years and leads the Mets to 2 or 3 World Series championships, will we say it came down to suites? It might. As crazy as it sounds, that might be a deciding factor. It does sound nuts, but don't rule it out. And, when push came to shove, because the Yankees wouldn't buy him a suite, wouldn't pay for the suite, he goes to Steve Cohen and the Mets and says, yeah, sure, have a suite, have 2. I don't care. I want Juan Soto. Crazy. All right, coming up, more on this RFK bill as time is ticking on that, what Roger Goodell said about that, more follow-up on Bill Belichick, and some interesting thoughts on what LeBron James may do from Ryan Russillo, who is as schooled on the NBA as just about anybody I know. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. We are going to see a Bill Belichick news conference this afternoon, unlike any other. that we've seen in his long coaching career. North Carolina is holding a news conference to do something that would have been absolutely impossible to believe a week ago. They're introducing Bill Belichick as the new coach, and I don't think we're going to get a lot of grumble. We're on to Cincinnati. He's going to be very open, I think, about this decision. I don't think he'll tell you exactly why he did it, but it's going to be a different Bill Belichick than we're used to seeing. Even his final news conference in New England when he parted ways with that team after all the success that he had, and I guess the relationship with Bob Kraft deteriorated a little bit. I'm interested in reading the long piece that Seth Wickersham wrote on ESPN. Came out just a little bit earlier this morning. Great investigative reporter for ESPN as to what happened here, and he's got a quote from a Belichick source, someone close to him, who said this was an FU to the NFL, that he looked around at the landscape. Yeah, he knew he was going to get to interview for some jobs. People would be interested this time around, but there wasn't a lot of interest last time. He did appear he was going to get the Falcons job. It seemed almost certain that he was going to go to Atlanta, and there are reports that Bob Kraft kind of screwed the deal for him by talking to other owners about how difficult he had become. And then we had the Amazon piece that came out about, how he had, kind of lost control to Bill Belichick. And I guess other owners were wary of that. But, he's going to be introduced today. And we'll get into more on that in a minute. I wanted to spend some time, though, on what's happening now on Capitol Hill with the bill that will hopefully – and I say this hopefully as a lifetime fan of this team going back to the 60s, that will hopefully pave the way for the team to build on the RFK site. Now, this was the RFK bill was originally introduced by House Oversight Chairman James Comer, who did speak. James Comer, who did speak with the Washington Times. He's from Kentucky. And he's getting frustrated with the fact that we're now just over a week away from the deadline for the Senate to vote on the RFK bill, which, if you're not familiar with it, it would extend the lease for the stadium, which is on federal land. It would extend it 99 years and change the zoning so they could build commercial property around the stadium. It's right now zoned for residential. And Comer told the Washington Times that the bill shouldn't be as complicated and as difficult to pass as it has been. Quote, "For the life of me, I don't understand why." And yesterday, Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, expressed frustration over this during an annual federal city council meeting. Bowser said Maryland is delaying an agreement over federal legislation that would give the district control of the RFK site by linking that deal to the pursuit of its other priorities, including separate legislation promising that the federal government will fully fund efforts to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which is estimated to cost close to $2 billion. Quote, "We're being held hostage by Maryland," Bowser told her colleagues at a group of business and civic leaders when asked about the status of the RFK legislation during a question and answer meeting. This is more from the story today in the Washington Post. Bowser told colleagues that the RFK bill cannot be held up by Maryland's quest for bridge funding, according to those people. And again, you've heard this, that the Senate needs to vote on this before they adjourn for the year, which would be December the 20th. And if they do adjourn with no voting on the bill, it gets tabled for another year. And who knows how much further down the line this is going to take. And, the goal for the team is to be in a new stadium by 2030. And with the way things are going with the district in this bill, it's possible they could build on the site. They own the land where the stadium is now. They would just build it closer to the Morgan Boulevard Metro, which would help to some degree. But I think most fans and most, even in Maryland, would prefer that the team move back to the District of Columbia, back to the treasured site of RFK Stadium. Bowser's office said her hostage comment referred to the fact that U.S. senators from Maryland have the ability to keep the RFK bill from moving forward. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has said that there must be an agreement with officials from Maryland before the RFK bill can proceed. Now, you heard this, too. Now, this has been denied by Maryland officials, but they were looking for a National Air Squadron that would be transferred from the district to Maryland. Ben Cardin has emphasized the importance of the flight squadron, according to people close to it, but this has been denied by Maryland officials on that. And that Bowser made the point about the bridge funding because she believes the RFK legislation shouldn't be attached to anything unrelated to that effort. And in an interview, she said the back and forth is akin to the sausage-making part of the legislative process. Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, he's been lobbying to keep the team in Maryland. He said building the bridge is a bipartisan national priority that is separate from the other issue. So, hopefully this gets voted on next week. A week from tomorrow is the deadline on this. Roger Goodell asked about it yesterday at his news conference at the owners' meeting in Dallas.
Well, I've talked to the mayor several times going back, I think, 2 years about allowing D.C. to have the ability to have a long-term lease. As you know, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I spent a lot of time at the old RFK Stadium. It's something that I think Josh and the Commanders want to evaluate. I think the city wants to evaluate, and I think the NFL does. So I see it as a very positive development that we can have another alternative that will allow us to get the kind of stadium in our nation's capital that is warranted, in my view.
The only significant part of that statement is he said nation's capital. He didn't say area, DMV as it's called now. I've always called it the Washington metropolitan area, but he didn't say Virginia. He didn't say Maryland. He said the District of Columbia. So that's, I guess, an important part of it. The rest of it is usual Roger Goodell, yabba yabba. It has to be looked at, has to be examined, all that stuff. It's just delay. But it's getting to be crunch time. And there is, I think, the great possibility, actually be a bad possibility, but the possibility that if there's no vote taken by next Friday, that this gets tabled for a year and we get closer and closer to the reality of the stadium being built in the same spot where they own the land. And, as I said many times, the stadium experience is becoming less and less significant. It's all about a television show. So, it's almost insignificant where they build it. I wouldn't say insignificant, but given the number of people who watch on television versus a stadium that will now be, if you were talking about this 15 years ago, you're probably talking about an 80,000-seat stadium. And FedEx at one point got to 91,000. Now you're talking about a 60,000-seat stadium. Yeah, it's going to be a dome stadium. It's going to be 60,000, and it's either going to be in the district or it's going to be in Maryland. And the next 8 days will, I think, tell a lot as to when it's going to happen and where it's going to be located. All right, back to the Belichick story. Again, I went through some of what Seth Wickersham has in his story about why it's college and not the pros. And the reaction initially might have been, well, look, he wants to coach, and clearly the NFL doesn't want him. That's clearly an indication here that he's checked around at the league. He saw what happened in the hiring cycle last year. He didn't get a job. He's on television, and he doesn't want to go through this again, knowing that the league doesn't want him. Albert Breer, who covers the NFL for SI.com on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, explaining it's not exactly that.
Here's the way I would look at it. Like, I think the simplest, most compact way to explain it is Bill was stunned by the lack of interest last year, right? Like, so you had 6 jobs open, not including New England, which obviously was the one that let him go. And he only got interest really from one team. And then the bureaucracy of that team got in the way of him getting that job. And so now, after a year, he's got the 30,000-foot view of the league. He's gotten to see it the way a lot of these teams operate, take a closer look at like how each team is affected by all the factors inside their organizations. And he's looking at the jobs that are open, and it's like, okay, like, so if I go to Chicago, I got to work for Kevin Warren and with Ryan Poles. If I go to the Jets, I've got to work with Woody Johnson. And I think it's like sort of this calculus of like, every team's not going to want me because that's the way it was last year. And of the ones that do want me, am I going to want them? Like, is that path to the right job going to be there for me? And can I count on that? And I think Bill badly wants to coach next year. And so, I think he sees that it's like sort of a narrow path to the perfect situation where things are set up exactly the way that he wants it with an NFL team. Meanwhile, I think, over the last 2-3 months, he and the people around him have done a lot of research on college jobs and what those look like. And I think what they found is that it's closer to the NFL than it ever has been before. The challenges are, and they may have an advantage because NIL is salary cap, because transfer portal is free agency, and because you might be able to get things up and running faster. I've heard a lot of people make the recruiting argument, right, Dan? Like, I'm sure you've heard that, right? Like, does he want to go into an 18-year-old's house and recruit? Do you know how many of those visits Deion Sanders
They
has
don't
made?
do that. They don't.
Zero.
They
Zero.
don't do that. All of a sudden,
Yeah,
you
so
go,
like-
Mom and Dad, Bill Belichick's on a Zoom call. Hey, Tommy, just want to say, come on in.
Yeah, that's the new world. You used to hear stories of coaches going to the house and trying the mom's spaghetti and saying how much he loved it, and that would seal the deal. Nah, it doesn't work that way anymore. It is all Zoom, and it's all about money, too. Money's a big factor. And North Carolina reportedly is going to pay him twice as much as Mac Brown, $10 million a year. And they realize if they want to do his plan, which reportedly was like a 400-page proposal, it's going to cost them some cash. So it's a way of doing business now, which is more similar to the NFL than it ever was before. Plus, he's going to get full control, which he would not have with NFL teams. They saw how he operated as a front office manager, general manager after the departure of Tom Brady, and they don't want to go through that. And this may be a disaster too. I mean, there's no sure thing, even though he's maybe the greatest football coach who ever existed, that he can make this transition from pro football to college football, having never been an assistant. Could it be a reverse Steve Spurrier, who was a disaster here as a head football coach in the NFL? True, it was a Dan Snyder team, but is one of the great college coaches of all time. He won at Duke, So this could be that way, too. As I mentioned earlier, I think there could be some similarities here also to Bill Walsh. He still may want the Don Shula record and may have an opportunity to start to pursue it next year, the 2026 season, in the way that Walsh, when he was passed over for the head coaching job in Cincinnati, when he was offensive coordinator, went to Stanford for a few years as a head coach and then got his shot with the 49ers, and the rest is history. That could be in play, too. And the other thing about the Shula record, which I recalled, remember when Jerry Faust was at Notre Dame, the high school coach, went from Moeller to Notre Dame and was in over his head, a wonderful man according to people, but not ready to coach at that level. There was talk that Don Shula, who is a devout Catholic, who went to church, I'm told, almost every day, was considering going to Notre Dame. That Shula, who had already won a couple of Super Bowls with the Dolphins, had been to another one with the Colts, was looking at the possibility of a coaching in college. So this could be history kind of repeating itself too, because I don't think Shula ever coached at the college level. I don't think he did. I think he was all pro when right from playing to coaching the Colts when he was like 32 years old. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in play here, and it's going to be, as we say, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. A couple of follow-up things from Dan Quinn yesterday at his news conference. One is this. Who'd have thought we would get to what is close to the middle of December now, and we have a team that's firmly placed in a playoff spot at number 7 and can even move up. And remember when we all kind of snickered that Dan Quinn, when asked about rebuilding, said we don't call it rebuilding, we call it recalibration. And a lot of us thought, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. You're going to win 5, 6, maybe 7 games this year. They've won 8 already with the possibility of winning 12. And I think very much the possibility of winning 11, win 3 of the last 4. So Quinn was asked about timetable and gave kind of the same answer he's given all along, but I think this is a little bit more insightful as to where his head is at as they go into the final 4 games of the regular season.
I didn't put a timetable on it to say there had to be something by this marker or this date. Adam and I wanted to go after it together as hard as we could and keep our head down to go. That's probably a better question, months from now when the season's done, to say what are the things that we've accomplished that we wanted to so far, and now what are the steps that we want to go ahead. As it sits today, I don't think too far down the line or too far back for that matter. And the reason I do that is just throw it all into this week with the guys and dig in from there. But it's been like a really cool journey so far, and I haven't allowed myself to look, like I said, too far down one way or another. But the people, like most things, make the experience, and so that's the part that I'm really enjoying in those relationships with those people.
And one of the people that makes that experience is the number 2 draft pick of the team, Mikey Sanderstrill, who we had heard going into the draft, this is a real find. Nick Saban saying on draft night that pound for pound, this may be the best player in the draft. And in the early part of the season, he had his rookie struggles. I remember Darryl Green had rookie struggles. It happens. But the way he's been playing the last few weeks, looks like they hit on him. And not really a surprise based on everything we heard going into the draft, but the fact that they were still able to get him in the second round and he's performed the way he has the last couple of weeks. Here's Quinn, who can't say enough good things about him.
We've got a group of guys that are part of a leadership crew here, and Mike's on it. And so that should say a lot, as a first-year player, that the other guys think of him in that way. And so I love seeing him develop in that way. And he's got some excellent mentors here to look after, but he's very intentional about improvement and getting better and finding the right things to hit on. And so that's the type of player that you want leading. And so, yeah, he's I'd heard he was remarkable in that sense before I met him. And I certainly have not been disappointed since then. I can remember asking a player there, if you could only bring one player with you from this group, who would it be? And the player was like, Mikey, why are you even asking me? And I thought to myself, okay, that's of a crew that had a lot of good players on that team. The player's response was Mike. And it wasn't even like a hesitation. It was almost like, I'm insulted that you asked that. So I thought that's a pretty good sign as what leading as a young guy would look like.
That's Dan Quinn yesterday, weekly news conference. The team is continuing its workouts today as they get ready to play on Sunday in New Orleans, and the Saints are being very coy about who the quarterback is going to be. Is it going to be Jake Haener or is it going to be Spencer Rattler? And what Quinn said about that was they run a system, and it doesn't change that much no matter who's playing quarterback. Neither one of them has much experience. Rattler's a rookie. He's made 3 starts. He's actually got more experience, but it does seem like they're going to go with Haener, and they're not going to tell you anything until the game comes up on Sunday. But that's something that I don't think it's troubling, but it would be really embarrassing if they lost to either one of those guys. All right, that's a wrap for me. Enough of that. Bram is coming up next, and I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.